Hey, thanks for having us.
Hey, how you doing?
You know, the last couple of days have been amazing here. How many people were at the workshops yesterday? Yeah, those workshops were great, weren't they? I think a lot of things that we heard in the workshop, we also heard in sessions today.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's been a long 2 days. This is the closing thing.
That's
it.
I
think how many folks here just kind of want to stand up? I encourage you to stand up.
Yeah, just
get that blood
stand up.
circulating. Come on, stand up.
Can they still stand up?
Yeah.
They can
While
still
you're
stand
standing up, do me a favor.
Yeah.
If you see someone near you that you don't know, introduce yourself.
Yeah.
It's a conference. So if you see someone you don't know,
yeah, just kind of move
shake
around.
their hand. It was a trick. It was a trick.
That's all right.
All right, enough of that.
All right.
Enough of that.
Hey, don't forget us.
Okay, now sit back down.
All right.
I tell you, these people.
I know, late in the day, Sean. It's late in the day.
Yeah, they still got their energy.
So
that's good.
Good.
All right, you guys in the back, sit down. Enough of that mingling. Tell ya. So a lot of what Jeff and I are going to be talking about today came from the book, The Customer Experience
That's right.
Revolution. We wrote the book a couple years ago. We're very happy about the book and the success of the book. We are pleasantly surprised that several universities carry the book as part of their business program for both marketing and experience design.
That's it.
Several businesses we know also use our book to help develop their customer experience program.
Yeah.
And we just found out from our publisher that it's in its third printing, so we're pretty excited about that. Hey, I don't know if anyone said anything, but I think they're giving away books here after this, and we'll be signing some books.
Yeah, I think it might be maybe the first 200. We're doing a book signing right after this. So
you can clap.
Put your gym shoes on.
We're pretty happy.
All right, and so forth. But we're really glad to be here. So why don't we start talking about the customer experience revolution?
So why the customer experience revolution, Jeff?
Well, Sean and I get asked this question a lot. Why customer experience? Why now? And I don't know, it started in 2007 that Sean and I started to track a group of companies, and they were large companies and small companies in different industries, and these companies seemed to do better than almost any other companies, even compared to the market indicators and economic indicators even through 2008, when the economy was doing very poorly, certainly by the last quarter. These companies lost less, and they gained more in 2009, and they have a resilience. So we wanted to take an even closer look at them. And so one of the first things we noticed was that they had in common the belief that great ideas and great products and great services were not enough for the kinds of businesses they wanted to build and the kinds of customers they wanted to attract. Okay? The other thing we noticed is that almost all the time these companies, which we nicknamed experience makers, and when these experience makers went into a market, they changed that market and changed that industry forever, and they also changed customers' lives forever. And so that was kind of our idea for the book, but that's also what's happening now in a great mass, actually, in several industries, which we're going to talk about.
When we were writing the book, we got to interview folks that worked at companies like Amazon and Apple and Netflix, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Some other folks we talked to were researchers like J.D. Powers.
Yep.
And one of the folks that we were lucky enough to talk to was Gary Tucker.
Yes.
Their SVP of Global Services and Emerging Industries. And it was a very serendipitous thing because J.D. Powers also had been working on this white paper that they were just about ready to release. They had noticed and were curious about the same things that Jeff and I were curious about.
Yeah.
They were kind of following this trend on customer experience. They were realizing it was kind of an emerging thing. And they did this global study. And they found out some pretty amazing things. Now, the most important thing, which Jeff already alluded to, is that folks that had a great customer experience, businesses that had a great customer experience, were more resilient, as Jeff said.
That's right.
And they were far more profitable.
Absolutely.
They found that people, consumers, would pay more for a better customer experience.
That's right. And we were really interested in what J.D. Power & Associates was seeing because we were looking at it from kind of different angles, and they had a lot of data about a lot of companies.
Yes. Some of the most interesting data that we found was and I'm still staggered at this today. But if you've been paying attention to anything at any of these, any of the sessions that you've been at, this probably won't surprise you that much. J.D. Powers found from this study, and again, a global study of companies, that only 5% of companies really understood customer experience and had it as a part of their strategy, only 5%. They identified another 25% either gave it lip service or were playing around with this idea, and a staggering 70% of companies either were not aware of customer experience or didn't think it had value to their business.
As a matter of fact, the 5% are the ones that really change industries and know customer experience the way we're going to explain it as we learn from multiple experience makers. But on that note about 70%, Sean, do you remember also that what they told us was 70%ers generally would actually deny that customer experience would have any positive impact on their business. Stunningly, even in the face of losing market share and revenue to an experience maker, and they would still deny that. And we've got some examples for you, actually.
People ignoring the data.
Ignoring what's happening.
Never had that experience, Jeff, people ignoring data. I tell you.
So how many people in the audience have at their company an actual kind of official customer experience definition? Show of hands. Don't worry, you don't have to get up. Anybody?
Quiz later.
You see?
So I see a few. That's great.
Okay.
And the follow-up question on that is that your company has a definition. How many people in your company would actually agree on what that definition is? Fewer hands. Okay, go ahead.
So one thing is, after interviewing a lot of the great people at the experience maker companies and then doing the research, the follow-up research, we realized that the existing definitions of customer experience really did not describe what they were doing and how they were successful. So the aggregate view gave us this definition of customer experience, and it's all interactions people have with or about a company's messages, people, processes, products, and services. Now, the interesting thing about what I just said was, first of all, that is the customer experience continuum, but it's the with and the about.
I noticed those words were highlighted, by the way.
Yeah, those are good. That's nice. No, it works. And the with and the about is you can have an experience directly with any one of those pieces of the customer experience. But it's the about part that makes customer experience more important than ever today, okay, and into the future, because old school, people would find out about your company by reading reviews or word of mouth. But of course, in the new world, it's all about social media and the efficiency of people, one person to many people, being able to share the experiences they're having with your company, either while they're having it, before they're having it, their anticipation, or even after they have it.
Well, the internet, right? The internet's changed everything, right? It's democratized information.
Yep.
So people are still reviewing things and they're getting things word of mouth, but the delayed reaction of reading a review or hearing something from your neighbor has now been completely sped up by social media, because now everything is instantaneous in terms of feedback.
And this all makes customer experience more important than ever. Another aspect of the definition is when the experience starts. Now, most companies actually believe that the customer experience starts when a transaction takes place. For instance, a company would say something like, become our customer and find out that we have the best experience, right?
Yep.
But the experience makers don't think like that. The experience makers know that the customer experience actually starts long before people are actual customers. And then through their being customers, and then on to, hopefully, kind of the holy grail of it all, which is when they're energized advocates advocating for your company.
And once again, this is due to the internet and the speed of information, where now the potential customer pool can be much bigger because we have this pool of information known as the internet, and advocacy can become much greater also through the internet and social media.
So, and then within the customer experience, there's something really, really important, right, Sean?
Just 2 reallys, not 3? Just really?
I don't know. It's late in the day, not 3.
So, maybe you needed to stretch and shake someone's hand.
Well, anyway.
So this is a question that Jeff and I get this question a lot. So what's the difference between customer experience and user experience? And really, it's in the words. So customer experience, as Jeff said, is this totality that your customers are experiencing with your company. It's a life cycle, it's a journey, it's a continuum. But within that experience, there are points of usage of where they interact with your company and your brand and your service, and that is the user experience, usage, user experience.
That's right.
And why this is so important is because if you are measuring and monitoring your customer's experience with your company, it's at these points, I like to call proof points, of where your promise is made. Now, your company is making a promise through your brand every day, regardless if you are managing it or measuring it.
Right, well, regardless of whether you're doing it on purpose or not.
Yes.
And it's the user experience that really comes through and tells the truth about the promises you're making in the customer experience. So, then another thing we noticed as we looked across some of the best, and again, this is regardless of whether they were small companies or large companies, regardless of industry, what we ended up calling the 3Ds, which was that they determine, develop, and deliver customer experiences. Now, the interesting thing about this is that they determine what the customer experience should be from the start before investing in any of the pieces in the customer experience. Then they develop the customer experience and try to make sure that it's true to the determination of it, and they also develop it by utilizing people that match the personas of either existing customers or the new customers. They involve people.
I want a show of hands of people who haven't heard the term persona sometime today. It seems to be one of the big topics. That idea that you know who your target customer is to determine and develop the right experience.
Yeah, and then all of the experience makers try to deliver on their promises as best they can strategically, tactically, and operationally. And they're very good at it. I mean, they do falter now and then, but the good ones come back quickly. So it's really, again, the 3Ds. Now, Sean, I remember from user experience and user experience design, there's something kind of the equivalent to user experience design. And
I'm curious. Is anyone in the audience who is a part of an experience design team, part of a user experience team? Any designers out there? Hey, all right. Thank you, my brother. So in our profession, in the user experience profession, we have research, design, and test. So we do the appropriate amount of user research that's needed to determine what that experience needs to be. We follow an iterative design process with that target persona to develop that experience, and then we do some type of testing or evaluation on the delivery that the promise is met.
That's it. And what I find interesting is you can use that same method for developing any pieces in the customer experience continuum, like the messaging or any of the processes.
Yeah,
right? Would that work?
That's a good point, Jeff.
Yeah.
So you could be doing this whole process of human-centered design, research, design, and test at any level of this. And at any point. So let's say, for example, you're trying to determine what your customer experience would be. Within that, you might do some research, and then do some iterative design testing of your concept, and then evaluate the effect of that. And also, to your point, you could take any piece of it, right? You could do that with your message. You could do that with your website.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
It's a best practice.
I'm going to keep you around, Jeff.
Hey, hopefully. So the challenge was finding a way to think about how we would compare companies and where they are regarding customer experience or how they go to market. And you can do this by company or by product or by service. And we came up with the customer experience hierarchy, okay? So think about this as a 5-stage go-to-market from here chart. So you have companies that go to market with ideas and technologies. They go directly to market. This can be including sweat equity, patents, and so forth. And then at the next level, there's a whole bunch of companies that go to market with products and services, okay? And they compete on changing the marketing message, maybe features, upgrades. They can get involved in what I call the Vortex of Commoditization, where they're having kind of a price war. And the experience makers actually love to compete with companies that go to market with products and services, because there really are a limited number of levers or options that can be changed, particularly when you're competing with somebody who's giving somebody a great customer experience where their willingness to pay is so high. And how many people in the audience, raise your hand if you go to market with products and services? Okay.
I think to some degree, most of us are in the products
and service. A lot of
business.
companies. But you know what's really interesting is the field really, really narrows at this next stage, right?
So does the pyramid. It gets narrow. Oh, that's the point.
Yeah, well, it's
so
supposed to.
There are some companies that I'll say wake up and they realize that their customers are interacting with their services, and then they want to measure that somehow, and they form user experience departments. It could be an ad hoc effort inside the company, but with some companies, especially some of the companies we'll be talking about, they're
right.
full-on departments. Sometimes they have teams within the company, and sometimes they have teams within the company, and also bring in consultants to help them out with that. And I asked how many people were experienced designers. How many people here have a user experience department of some kind? Just out of curiosity. Oh, a lot more hands went up. Okay, very cool.
Okay.
Now the pyramid gets really narrow.
Yep.
Because now we're talking about those 25%ers.
The top of the top, the top of the top of the 25%ers.
Yes, yeah, good point. So some companies realize that, hey, there's something beyond just this user experience. There's this whole continuum that we were talking about
Yep.
Before, and they build some way of managing and monitoring that. They create maybe a customer experience department. Maybe there's someone running around with the title of VP of Customer Experience, right?
Right.
And again, this, as Jeff pointed out, this is the top part of those 25%ers. Not the bottom ones that are just talking about it and not doing anything.
Right, just the lip service. They're only giving lip service.
Yeah, not those guys,
Yeah,
but the
no.
ones that are actually experimenting with it. But what really interested us when we were writing the book was the capstone of this pyramid, the customer experience leaders. And we were so fortunate to talk to folks at this company. And the two big takeaways
Yeah.
I noticed about the leaders that fascinated me was, first off, there was a combination of there was leaders in their company that evangelized this and put this into their DNA.
Yeah,
Everyone
yeah.
in the company knew the value of customer experience and that customer commitment within the company.
It was a culture.
It was a culture.
It was a culture.
And it was something that they continuously did. It was something
Yeah.
that they measured and monitored it. And not all of them were always successful. And we'll
Right.
talk about some of them, but how many people here remember the Apple Newton or the Apple Lisa, right? Those weren't successful, but Apple is definitely an experience maker, right?
Yeah.
We'll also talk a little bit about Netflix.
That's right.
Who also, had their hiccup along the way.
Well, and I know, Sean, too, I remember you talking to Karen Hansen at Intuit, right? And she was talking about how these leaders measure the difference in...
Yes, so that
Right?
was my second point. That was
Yeah.
a great segue for that
Yeah,
second point.
okay.
So the other thing that we noticed about the customer leaders was
Yeah.
that they measured their success in their marketplace, not like with a SWOT analysis like many of us do,
Yeah.
but they actually, and I kid you not, they measured their gap between where they were and their competition.
Experience for experience. In other
Yes.
words, they really understood their competitors' customer experience and their own, and what that difference was. And in Intuit's case, and Karen Hansen shared this with us, I remember, she said that ours was, the gap was narrowing between us and the competition, so our customer experience life cycle was getting old from a competitive standpoint, so they reinvigorated it.
Right, they actually did the 3Ds.
Yeah.
So between the releases of their software, they went back and re-examined what they're doing. They were determining what they needed to do, then they developed it, and of course they tested it, and then they increased it.
That's
so
it.
I thought that fascinated me. So those were the distinctions, the two important distinctions between the leaders. Oh, it's polling question
It's polling time. Okay.
All right, so here we go. So the question is, where is your company on the custom experience hierarchy? Please go ahead and put in your keywords.
Yep. Are you at ideas and technology? Do you go to market with products and services? Are you focused on user experience? Are you focused on customer experience? Or are you one of the leaders, one of the 5%ers? So please vote now. interesting.
Well, it looks like it's adding up right.
Wow.
I like the music. I can dance to
Yeah,
it.
this is very interesting. We're almost, is it almost baked? It's almost baked?
I think we can comment at any point
All right.
here.
Well, obviously, products and services it really is in the lead, but it's great to see that there's plenty of companies focused on customer experience. And Sean, what do you make of 22% for UX, huh? User experience?
Yeah, user experience was first coined at Apple in the mid '80s, and has definitely have grown. I've seen more and more companies establish a user experience department. One of the things I think is interesting about this data compared to some of the things that Paige did, that big 44% is equivalent to the type of question that she asked, about the same percentage at about the same level when she asked, are you an expert?
Yeah.
So there seems to be a direct correlation between the two, which is interesting. And that's why we like data, right? For those,
That's it.
Those correlations.
Data works.
So speaking of Apple.
Yes. Well, let's talk a little bit about the iPhone, and it's well known, but what we want to do is take a look back before we look forward regarding customer experience.
We're going to hop in the Wayback Machine.
The Wayback Machine, but
back
we've
to
got some
2000
interesting
and
data to
something.
look at, John. And what it is think about what a tall assignment it would be if somebody came into your office and said, we're not in the smartphone business, but I'd like you to compete with the likes of BlackBerry and Nokia and Palm and Motorola. Okay?
How many people thought it was crazy that Apple was even getting into the phone business? Like, I didn't think there was a spot in the market for them when I heard that they were doing a phone. And I was like, what are they going to do any different? I loved my Nokia phone. What were they going to be able to do any different than what Nokia had done?
Well, we figured that Apple, Steve Jobs and his team at Apple were looking at the smartphone market for at least 3 years. And we call it taking bold steps with customer experience, because that's exactly what they did. We know that the customer experiences and the user experiences that people were having with their smartphone, particularly between 2003 and 2006, were not that good, actually. And we're sure that that's what Apple was looking at when they decided that it would be a good idea to go into that market. For instance, one of the things that they saw was that the hardware manufacturers would include a poker, okay? A poker, eloquently called a stylus, with their device.
That sounds way better than a poker.
It's a
stylist.
Poker, stylus, But whatever it was interesting because the purpose of it was to have people adapt to the hardware and adapt to the software, right?
You're right. Humans adapting to the technology. Mm-hmm.
Well, certainly Apple was taking a different view of how they were going to use hardware and software because they were going to have hardware and software adapt to how people wanted to use it.
The other part of it was the small keys. So the combination
plastic ones.
of losing the stylus and having the small keys was not a good experience.
Not good. The other thing that they understood was they really understood what I call the do-fors, which are kind of an elevated value proposition that's just been totally proven and vetted out. What people wanted to do with their smartphones, and certainly, it's history now, but what they wanted to do was beyond voice, they wanted to listen to music, and they wanted to access the internet, and they also did not want to use the stylus anymore because that gave them anxiety, and people would worry about losing it and so forth. So Steve Jobs, at the introduction of the iPhone, said, we're going to replace that with something natural, one we were born with, which is the finger, okay? And so, kind of the rest is history. What's really interesting is that was the beginning of the customer experience revolution in the smartphone market, okay? We were very fortunate to talk to a fellow named Larry Tesler. Now, Larry Tesler worked with Steve Jobs, and I think he has a pretty cool title.
He also got to work with Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, he went on to work with Jeff Bezos at Amazon.
Yeah, so he was chief scientist at Apple, and then went on to be VP of consumer experience at Amazon.
Wasn't it? That was one of the most interesting interviews.
Yes, it
was. Larry was so insightful, and what he shared with us was that, Steve said whether it was positioning in the market or developing the message or readying customer service, if it was not right or ready, he said delay the launch, delay the product, okay? And the most interesting thing about this was that it wasn't because he was trying to shoot for endless perfection. What Larry shared with us was Steve Jobs, the view was that if you had internal dates that you were trying to hit for production, or you had an external market entry date that you wanted to hit, it was actually better to not actually make those goals and actually refine the pieces in the customer experience continuum to give people a great experience, because people will remember the experience they have with your company much longer than they will remember whether you met an internal date or an external market introduction date.
Yeah, the best thing to think about is the experience that Microsoft delivers compared to Apple.
Yeah,
both of
that's a
them
great
aren't
analogy.
very good at meeting their dates.
Yeah.
Microsoft's probably a little bit better. But Microsoft follows up with a lot of patches.
Yeah.
And it seems like their, their odd number operating systems seem to be working better than their even number ones.
Yeah.
But to the point, Apple is notorious for being late on hitting their deliverables, but we all forget because it's such a great experience. I don't care that it's late. I'm just happy to have the Apple product.
Yeah, and we've seen the long-term outcome of that kind of thinking, right?
Yes, yes, we have.
So what's real interesting is, and I get real excited about this, because to have the data to show what a customer experience revolution looks like in a particular market is fascinating, okay? So what we've got here is Gartner data, and this is unit volume by market share. And as you can see here, that the customer experience revolution in the smartphone market took place in early 2007, and then again later in 2007 when the iPhone actually hit the market, and then Google unveiled the Android operating system. And certainly you can see also in 2009, Samsung with an Android-based phone was introduced. And so at this point, the market was really flooded with a lot of units that were from experience maker companies, okay, between Android and Apple iOS. What's very interesting is that you can see by 2010 the market's starting to expand, but there's a couple companies below that that are 70%ers, okay? And it's fascinating because the market is certainly very healthy right now, as you can see the unit volumes in 2012 and 2013. But the bottom line, see what happens now in the blue is BlackBerry, and then just above that in orange is Nokia. Now these are 70%er companies.
They represent those 70%ers we were talking about.
Right. Now, if you want to compete in this market's changed to experience. It's no longer product and features and so forth. Let's look at some of the latest data ending up at 2013. The blue is Apple. And then the combination of gold and gray, that 98% of that is Android. So this is an experience maker market.
Yeah, and this brings up a good point. And
this market's gone. It's flipped.
That's right. So this brings up a good point about what happens to a marketplace when an experience maker enters into it. So if you think about the phone market before Apple's, everyone was competing on features mostly, right? And then Apple comes into this marketplace, and it elevates the marketplace to a experience economy.
Yeah.
And what you see is that whenever an experience maker enters a marketplace and they elevate it to an experience economy, the only people who can even compete are other experience makers. And we'll give more examples as we go along.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, you just reminded me, if you remember in 2010, Stephen Elop became the CEO of Nokia, and his job was to turn the company around. This is just a quick one. And
okay, better be a quick one because we got like 10 minutes left.
And he was having a town meeting.
Jeff has all these stories.
Because he was inventorying Nokia, and he had 5 Nokia phones. And there were 5 different ways to mark whether emails were read or not, with multiple strokes and so forth. And he said,
this is a good story.
Okay, all right. So
keep on going.
So all right, I'll keep going. And so what happens is, he says, this is an example of the things that we have to change inside here, because if we have these discrepancies inside, think about the external experience. And there was an engineer in the audience who raised his hand and said, well, Mr. Elop, you're not understanding how to work those phones. I'd like to come up on stage and tell you how to work these phones. And the engineer came up, and after a couple minutes of puttering around, he apologized to Mr. Elop, and then kind of sheepishly went back and sat down. Okay? And remember, this was 3 years after the customer experience revolution. So it was probably a cultural thing.
So the point of the story is that Nokia had a pretty serious problem that put them in a 70%er.
Yeah, they didn't get it. When the market changed, they couldn't change to experience.
So again, the company that claims to be the most customer-centric company and is still a leader across many indexes is Amazon. And another folk that we got to talk to at J.D. Powers was their chief research officer, Gina, who said a couple of things about Amazon. She said that they fundamentally changed the way that people interact and expect to interact with an online provider.
That's right.
And when you have a company that sets a new bar on expectation, it sets a bar for every company. Now, there's a couple of takeaways here that go back to our definition.
Right.
And that is
Right.
the changing of the expectation of the interaction, i.e., it changes your life.
Yeah.
The other part of it sets the bar for other companies, i.e., it changes an industry, which is what drives the definition that we talked about. The other interesting thing, and I'm sure Paige mentioned this also, the other interesting thing is that because of this, you're not being compared by competitors in your market. You could, for example, be at your bank trying to do some kind of transaction, and you will not compare it to another bank. You'll compare it to how easy it was to order a book at Amazon. So
That's
this
right.
really changes the way that we need to think about our marketplace.
Right. Think about who's setting your potential customers and customers' experiences along the customer experience continuum.
And look outside of your industry, because some of the best
Absolutely.
practices may not even be in your industry.
Well, as you said, people don't compare the experiences they have in nice, neat industrial categories.
Not anymore.
So,
Not
yeah.
anymore. The other thing that Jeff Bezos has shared with us, which also was a game changer, also something that we found with all the experienced leaders, was this idea of a longer-term view.
Yeah.
And this is probably another one of the themes that you've heard here at SDL today, that real experience makers think long-term.
That's right.
Sometimes it takes 2 to 5 years to actually see a significant change in your market. We heard a statistic today that it takes, what did we heard? 2 years to see a significant change in your social media strategy once it's been implemented. So these things take long terms. Bezos knew this, and he said, our strategy is not to make money. Now, I don't know how many people were around in 1998 when he was talking about this, but they waited 6 years before they showed any kind of profitability, and Wall Street was not happy about it.
That's it. As a matter of fact, Wall Street wasn't happy when, I don't know if you remember this, but Wall Street was very disappointed when Bezos took a lot of the money and didn't put it into profits, but put it into free shipping. But his strategy was to flank around the competitors and offer that, and that was another area he raised the bar in.
Long-term strategy.
Right.
We found with all the experience makers, they had
Yeah.
long-term strategy. They weren't thinking short-term.
They were thinking long-term.
The other thing that Bezos said was making a bad purchase decision isn't just a waste of money, it's a waste of time. And time is so precious.
Yeah. Matter of fact, even when you interviewed Steve Swayze at Netflix, he said the same thing. When we asked him what his number one competition was, he says we're competing with people's time.
We're
right?
competing with people's time. Exactly right. So this is just another example of the great experience makers sharing this understanding about commitment to the customer, long-term strategy.
That's it.
Oh,
Okay.
It's time for another polling question.
Yep. All right.
What is your favorite Amazon innovation? Free shipping, customer ratings and review, one-click checkout, Kindle, or drone delivery?
Oh, I like that drone delivery. I like drone delivery.
That was my idea.
I don't know if my neighbors are going to like drone delivery.
Oh my God, people are voting for it. That's hilarious.
Oh, there we go.
Look, it doesn't exist yet, okay? It's a joke. All right, we got some comedians in the audience.
Wow. Well, clearly free shipping, and that's what causes a lot of Amazon competitors to have to offer free shipping.
It was really free shipping that made them win their market, so
Yeah.
kudos.
Oh, customer ratings and reviews, interesting.
You know, yeah, so ratings and review, Amazon was the first one to do ratings and reviews. And the publishers
They didn't like that.
did not
Publishers
like the
did not
idea
like that.
of people being able to rate their books. Like, what are you thinking? They're
Yeah,
not going to
yeah.
buy the book if they get a bad review. But Bezos had that foresight, and now I can't think about doing anything without giving it a rating.
That's
for
it.
Sure.
So excellent and very interesting. And Sean, those drones are strong.
I'm surprised at how much people like them.
You know. Well, now let's talk a little bit about slaying giant Blockbuster. Really the great work that that Netflix has done. That Netflix has done. But before we talk about Netflix and the innovation of the customer experience, let's get a little background on Blockbuster. Okay, Blockbuster was in the mid to late 80s the company that really took a very splintered mom and pop industry and made a chain of stores, and it was a consistent store-to-store experience. People had computerized accounts, and what would become their Achilles heel, actually, would be customer penalties as a profit center. Think about that. Customer penalties as a profit center.
It was a great experience going there. I mean,
Right.
You'd go to the store, you'd be excited about the movies. The movies were out
Right.
on the floor. You could peruse them. You got excited.
Yeah.
You got the movies. You went home. You watched it. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And then you had to return it. And then it wasn't so awesome.
Right. Late fees, rewind fees. And if you're not old enough to remember rewind fees, congratulations. That's all I can say, because it wasn't, it was not pleasant. Well, anyway, realistically, this is one of my favorite examples, because everything would change in the customer experience except the movies that people would watch. And Hastings...
Yeah, think about that. So the actual product did not change.
That's
Movies are still movies, but they changed the experience around the movie.
That's it. And Reed Hastings' bad experience at Blockbuster, Reed Hastings actually rented the movie Apollo 13, and he lost this movie. Okay, he lost the movie. And when he found it, it was to the tune of a $40 late fee. Okay, true story. And when he was asked, well, what was your concern when you found the movie? Because it was already anxiety enough that you were late, but $40. His biggest concern was that he was thinking about lying to his wife. He said, I'm actually thinking about lying to my wife about this.
That's not a good situation.
Yeah, it was, and then as he put it, I have to worry about the sanctity of my marriage over a late fee. He says, this is wrong. So he sort of had it planted in his mind that something had to be done.
There had to be a better experience.
There had to be a better experience. And at the same time, Reed Hastings worked out at a gym for a flat fee, right?
Hey, that's a good idea.
And then another thing, and remember, this was late 90s, 1998, and his friend told him about this new thing called a DVD, right? It was like a CD, but it would carry a movie. And so he was starting to think about this, and he went down to Tower Records, and he bought a bunch of CDs, and he mailed them to himself, and they were fine. He opened the big envelope, and they were fine, and that's when he had his aha moment. I think I've got an idea. I think this is going to work, and he put together the offer, which was composed of course, the DVDs that would carry the movie, and then the post office, the deal with the post office, and then the website. And it was real interesting, because that is how Netflix was born, okay? And we did the research after interviewing Steve Swayze, who works with Reed Hastings, and in small print, back in 2002, we utilized technology to enhance subscriber experience. Fascinating, okay?
And we live in the subscription, economy now, right? We're living
absolutely.
in it.
Way ahead of the curve. As a matter of fact, that kind of set the goal.
Do-fors, personalization, what are you talking about here, Jeff?
Well, again, we see an experience maker understanding what people wanted the experience to do for them, okay? And there's no middle, and people are either,
doing for or doing two.
Okay. And then the personalization. Now, this was really interesting, because it was about the same time that Amazon was using suggestive selling, or I call it the digital concierge, gathering data about people, right, that would later turn into analytics to make suggestions. And it worked, because then people would rent more and so forth. But then there's Sean's favorite part of this. Okay, this is your favorite part.
The proximity. He keeps on saying it's my favorite
You're a
part.
proximity
It is
guy.
kind of cool. Okay, so as we talked about before, before you had to drive to a brick and mortar to
Right.
get the movie, right? So what Netflix did, as we all know, if you're a Netflix user, and I'm sure most people are, they brought it to your mailbox. I didn't have to get in my car, and with the price of gas these days, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then they brought it to my device, so wherever my device was, I could watch the movie. And then, of course, in the last couple of years, they brought it to my remote, so I didn't even have to get off the couch. I could just press that Netflix
they said
button.
that little red button. And then didn't you, during the interview...
We're not going to talk about that, are we?
Well, I mean, we can mention it. Well, when you think about it, that the proximity of the experience is important and where people want to have it, and now it went from a store to the mailbox to the button, and Sean, he sort of asked,
where's it moving?
I mean, are we getting something implanted in our head?
No, it's going to be glasses. They're going to be Netflix, like Google glasses.
Okay.
There you go, Jeff.
So,
another company we want to talk about is Intuit. How many folks here are familiar with Intuit? They make TurboTax and Quicken. They're also a experience leader, and their founder and CEO, Scott Cook, much like Bezos and Jobs, is a huge advocate of user experience. He built the company on experience design, and he's the guy who coined the term follow people. And this is a key to all the experience makers that we know. And what this means about following the people to where they use your product, it's a fancy term that we use in our industry called contextual inquiry. It basically means observing your customers using your product where they naturally use it. So for example, I am doing my TurboTax on my mobile device at Starbucks. Right? Or in the case of Netflix, they actually have a lab, a room that looks just like someone's living room, and they go out to people's living room and watch them use Netflix. As does Intuit go out and watch people do their taxes or set up their software. As does Apple. So all of the experience maker follow this process.
Yep, they have labs, and then they do external ethnography. I think that's the
ethnography. You're actually going to throw that word out there?
But seriously, so let's talk about a real interesting company that has transformed mobile transactions, and that is Square. Now, other companies have tried to do this, really open up the market for the ability for mobile devices to take credit cards. And Jack Dorsey, who you might know his name as the co-founder of Twitter, but he is the founder of Square. And Jack's style is that he's on a quest for lifelong simplicity, and he likes efficiency. And as a matter of fact, some of the people have said that he likes the idea of what a frictionless user experience and a frictionless customer experience. And so we found that transformation was fantastic in that market for a couple of reasons. And a couple examples are obvious do-fors, nice clean website design, and not a bank application experience. He knew that people didn't want to fill out a whole lot of fields. So it's short, and then the scanner gets mailed to you. You download an app, which is elegantly designed, and you're in business. And if you ever, if you're not familiar with Square, if you ever see those squares, you know where they come from.
We're grossly over time here.
Go ahead.
So we want to leave you with some ideas here. So this is the hierarchy that we spoke about earlier, but what we overlaid here is that idea of the 5%, the 25%, and the 70%ers. And what you see over here to the right of the pyramid are the companies that appear in the book and where we kind of plotted them against this. But Jeff and I, we're curious guys. We're not done. We're very interested in where customer experience is going. We still do a lot of reading. And we have the ones to watch, Jeff.
Right. There's several companies to watch. Tesla, not just for their innovative automobile, but for their Apple-like shopping experience. And then certainly Uber, who literally flipped the model in trying to grab a taxi and makes the customer the dispatcher. And they have a nice, interesting combination of analog and digital, but it's all weaved together in a great customer experience. So watch these two, and we're out of time, but there's many more to watch.
One more polling question.
Okay.
We're grossly over time, but we're going to do a polling question. The question is, who is your favorite experience maker leader? So we got Jobs from Apple, Bezos from Amazon, Cook from Intuit, Dorsey from Square, and Schultz from Starbucks. Cue that music.
All right, and don't forget to vote. Wow, that's interesting.
Poor Scott Cook.
Well, you know, I don't think a lot of people know who Scott Cook is. They might know their products. Right?
Yeah, most people know their products.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, certainly Steve Jobs is just well in the lead there, and then followed by Jeff Bezos. And Scott Cook, well, I think not too many people know. They know the products of Intuit, but maybe not the leadership.
I want to tell you, from an experienced designer, Scott Cook's important. So.
Wow. That's
Though many people may not have voted for him.
Very good. Well,
that's our time.
Yeah, that's our time, but thank you
very much
for having us, and think about where you are in the customer experience continuum.